So as I told you in my radar, congressional candidate and Mayor Alex Morse is facing allegations of improper conduct by several groups of college Dems. The Progressive Justice Dem is running against Massachusetts incumbent Democrat Richie Neal.
So in a detailed statement he tweeted out on Sunday, Morse pledged his full support in the review process, saying he was sure his name would be cleared. He also vowed to continue his pursuit of Neal's congressional seat. So joining us to talk about the recent allegations and his plan to stay in the race is Holyoke Mayor Alex Morse himself. Alex, it's great to see you.
Great to have you, Alex.
Yeah, good morning. Thanks so much for having me on.
Sure. Mr. Mayor, we'll cut to it quite quickly. So these allegations, they've surfaced in the Boston Globe and across national media. In this letter, they accuse you of regularly matching with college students on dating and hookup apps like Grindr and Tinder, adding people to your close friends list on Instagram, sending them direct messages, and engaging in sexual contact with college students. We wanted to give you a chance to address those allegations and whether you feel that your conduct was appropriate or not.
Yeah, so I got into public life when I was 21 years old. I'm openly gay. I've been single for the vast majority of the last 10 years. And one thing I will not apologize for is for being a young person and having other consensual adult relationships. And I want to be very clear that never in my adult life have I been part of a non-consensual relationship or a sexual encounter with anyone. And as a young person and as a gay person, I do use gay dating apps, and I have matched with college students. And college students live in the area. I live in Western Massachusetts, and I am not going to apologize again for using gay dating apps and meeting other men on those apps and having conversations. And I do want to honor the students' perspective, those that are saying that they were made to feel uncomfortable. I apologize for that, and I can't discredit their truth or how they feel. But what I know for sure is that I am not under that impression that I made someone uncomfortable, but that's for them to decide, not for me. And so the students deserve to be heard. And like I said, I will fully cooperate with any process, and I am completely confident that I have not violated any policies of the University of Massachusetts. And I believe that I have every right to have consensual relationships with other men.
And Mayor, just to be clear, none of the students with whom you had sexual contact were your own students in any of your classes while you were a lecturer, correct?
That is correct.
And then can you give us just a little bit of background here? When did these allegations come to your attention? When did you find out that this letter was going to go out, that you'd be disinvited to the events? And what is your understanding of the specific nature of the allegations here?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the letter from the college Democrats, there is very little specificity. There are no names. Even their follow-up statement talks about Instagram messages, but doesn't even go as far as to say that the messages were inappropriate. Anyone on my close friends on Instagram knows that I take pictures of sunsets and take pictures of chocolate chip cookies and blueberry muffins that I cook. It's nothing salacious. And so I just think it's interesting that 3 weeks out, we're talking about my personal sex life and not talking about what a non-responsive, unaccountable corporate Democrat, and talk about an abuse of power. We have a member of Congress that is abusing his power on behalf of the wealthy and corporations for the last 30 years. And I will be very honest, your question about how long have we heard about this, this story has been shopped around to national publications for the last several weeks. And Politico, the Washington Post, other national publications refused to print it because they couldn't get anyone on record. And so basically the UMass Daily Collegian just printed word for word an email from the college Democrats. And the mainstream media, I think, have done an incredible disservice by amplifying this. And publications from the Boston Globe to other outlets have given more scrutiny to my personal sex life and personal life than they've ever given scrutiny to Congressman Neal's corruption and the way in which he's used his power over a 30-year period.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's an incredibly fair point, Mr. Mayor. So, I mean, let's talk a little bit about that. Do you think that this is something that was used to politically smear you on behalf of the Neal campaign?
I mean, what I will say is that it's incredibly suspicious that this is coming out 3 weeks before the primary election.
Yeah. And Mr. Mayor, I think your point about how this whole conversation is revolved around use of power, use of status, and use of position, and that there's been very little analysis of the way that Congressman Neal has used his power and status and position while he has been an incredibly powerful member of Congress here in Washington, D.C. I think that's an incredibly important point here. But I do want to know your thoughts on that conversation around power dynamics and status within sexual relationships. There was an allegation that essentially that complicated consent was the language. Taking yourself out of this, if that's possible whatsoever, what are your views on those dynamics?
Yeah, no, it's an interesting question, and this is something that I think our community and our country needs to grapple with. I think we're an incredibly sex-negative society, and we have this fantasy that people in politics or not are asexual beings behind closed doors. And I mean, no adult should have to apologize for having sex, for having personal relationships. What I've realized is, I became mayor at 22 years old, and that office, that status, and essentially that power follows me in every facet of my life, whether I'm at City Hall, whether I'm at the grocery store, or whether I'm in my bedroom. And I think, if anything, what this conversation has taught me over the last several days is that I do have to be more cognizant of my position. But as a young person that has struggled to balance a political public life with, trying my best to be a normal young person, and engaging in consensual activity has been a challenge. And it was never my intention to abuse power whatsoever, and I don't think that I ever have. And I want to be very honest about that. I've never used my status as mayor or a guest lecturer at UMass Amherst to coerce, to take advantage of any students. And if there are students that feel uncomfortable by friendly Instagram messages around thanking them for the panel and for the event, but this suggestion that I would seek out college students at College Democrats event is completely untrue. I've never met or hooked up with a student that I met at a College Democrats event. I've been to one College Democrats event since I announced this campaign over a year ago. And so, again, I think this is not just a conversation about consensual adult relationships. This is a conversation about the media and the scrutiny on a candidate's personal sex life so close to the election. And the same media sources really not scrutinizing the dynamics in this race and the abuse of power of this congressman in so many ways over the last 3 decades.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly agree with you on that critique there. So, Mr. Mayor, how has this been received in the local community? I mean, have you felt any impact in the race? Has there been statements of support from groups that supported you in the past, or have you lost any support so far?
Yeah, I do want to say, I want to thank the outpouring of support we have here in the district and across the country. We've had one of our best fundraising weeks since we launched this campaign last July. People in this district and across the country, see this for what it is, a very suspicious argument and an allegation coming out 3 weeks before the election. And I trust not only the people of Holyoke, as I have over the last 9 years, but the people of this district to focus on policy, to focus on why we're running. I want to thank the number of local elected officials that continue to stand by me. I want to thank the LGBT Victory Fund, the country's largest organization supporting openly queer candidates for office, for calling this what it is. And what's most problematic is this age-old response to these allegations, the language being used to describe these allegations. And people like me that have had to endure an over-policing of our sex lives as a member of the queer community. And the number of LGBT folks that have reached out over the last few days who are so familiar with this language and this framing of gay men as predators is incredibly problematic, and something that we have been going up against for generations. And so many people messaging me and say, stay in this fight, because young people and queer people need freedom too, and we deserve to run for office. And will young people ever run? Will gay people ever run for office if this is how powerful people are going to treat us when we actually want to make a difference in this country?
Yeah. I mean, Mr. Mayor, as you probably know, when I ran for Congress, I had a similar, last minute, people published these salacious, quote unquote, photos of me at a costume party, and it was treated like some major scandal. And I found exactly what you're describing, that the people in my district were like, we actually care a little bit more about like healthcare and having a job than about whatever you're doing at a party when you were 22 years old. So I'm heartened to hear that you've had the same response from people in your district and around the country. But I want to give you the chance to make the case. Listen, we've covered Congressman Neal here on this show, some of his corporate ties, his throwing a birthday party for AIG, for example, as one sort of indication of where he has had his bread buttered while he's been a member of Congress. Why is it so important for members of your district to switch horses here when you have a member who's very senior, who's got a lot of power? Why should they take a chance on you?
Absolutely. I mean, we do not have leadership or representation right now. He has power. He's one of the most powerful Democrats in Washington, but he's not using it for us. We have some of the worst outcomes: hospitals closing, people going bankrupt, people straddled with medical debt, people unable to access basic broadband internet, housing and food insecurity, Springfield being the asthma capital of our entire country. And then we have Richard Neal, who's been in Washington for 30 years, who refused to use his power to hold this president accountable, who refuses to use his power to fight for a healthcare system that believes healthcare is a human right. He's an ardent opponent of Medicare for All. He's the only Democrat in Massachusetts congressional delegation refusing to sign on to the Green New Deal, and right now takes more corporate money than any member of the House, Democrat or Republican. He killed a bill that would have ended surprise medical bills. He killed an amendment in Ways and Means that would have allowed the government to negotiate cheaper drug prices. He killed a bill that would have allowed folks to use the IRS's free tax filing system after taking money from H&R Block and Intuit. This guy is as corrupt as they come. He wants to be able to hand choose his successor. And this has become about the politics of personal destruction and not about policy, because Congressman Neal's know he can't win on policy. And so I would encourage folks to tune into this race. We have a debate next Monday, to check out alexmorseforcongress.com, to chip in, to phone bank, to volunteer, to help us make sure we have the resources to keep up this fight in the final 3 weeks.
Well, we'll be watching that debate closely, Mr. Mayor. We appreciate you joining us to address this. Appreciate it, sir.
Thanks for taking the time this morning. We appreciate it.
No, I appreciate you. Thank you.
Next on Rising, The Intercept's Ryan Grimm on Hakeem Jeffries' relationship with progressives, and the Representative Ilhan Omar's primary today when Rising continues.